And we're live.
Hey,
Hello.
everybody. We are back. We're an hour late. Absolutely nobody's
That's my
fault.
fault.
Nobody's fault. Nobody thought it was an hour and a half movie and then found out at the last second that it was 2 hours.
It's who makes a 2-hour movie? That's a long movie, okay?
Yeah. Also, in the post I made earlier this week, I said Cole was gonna be here, but he's not because Cole is dumb.
Can we get an F in chat for Cole? Oh, we already have an F in chat.
Cole was like, I gotta do homework, as if that matters.
What a noob who does homework. We should just
homework is the reason I quit school.
And Ian is also not with us this week either.
Actually, I graduated. That's why I quit school. But homework was a bonus.
I was gonna say, yeah. It's a reason you didn't go back.
But yeah, Ian is also not with us here tonight because why is he not here?
I think he's like time traveling or like I don't remember.
I think he got swept up by a government organization and is now being experimented on.
Oh, you know what it was? He went to the Area 51 raid and he didn't make it back.
There you go. I was right.
There you go. Yeah. He was captured by the government. They're now experimenting on him, pumping him full of alien juices or whatever.
Oh my god.
Whatever they do at that place.
But he should be back for our next episode.
Yep.
Hopefully.
But yeah, so we're talking about one of the anime legends. We're talking about the 1980s anime hit Akira. And this, I had actually, as big of an otaku as I am, I had not seen Akira, so this was a really good chance for me to get caught up on one of the classics. This movie was a lot.
Yeah.
Let me just go down the list here. What did you guys think of this movie?
I have very few words on that matter, Brian.
All you need is a sentence, I think.
Well, I messaged Brian when I was watching it. I was about 55 minutes into it, and I just said something along the lines of, I feel like I need some kind of substance to understand this movie.
Some sort of hallucinogenic substance of some variety.
Yeah.
Certainly the writers were on something at the time. Not to the extent I think of like Adventure Time or stuff like that. But
man, you leave Adventure Time alone.
Adventure Time was definitely written well on LSD. Come on.
That's fair.
There's no doubt in my mind.
No, like it's a cool like concept. Like I definitely, I'm sitting here as I do with every podcast that we're on, except for shows that I'm like utterly obsessed with. I have like the wiki open so I can like read like what is like actual plot summary as opposed to just me doing my half-assed like notes. It makes a little sense now that I'm reading the summary of it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get that now. But yeah,
I have to say, I was today I went back and I rewatched the first half of the film while I was taking notes, and it was like going back and watching it for a second watch through. This movie made so much more sense. Like,
what did I say?
It definitely seems like a movie you have to watch a couple times to start to get what's going on.
Yeah. Annika?
Oh, hi.
Oh yeah, we should probably, and she's never been on the podcast before. Hey everybody, this is Annika. Annika, tell the nice people what you do for KRWBY.
Do I do something for KRWBY? I make sure the children don't fight, and I voice nobody, because nobody wants me to be on the casting talent, but I'm
That is
trying.
not true. That is not true at all. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
She definitely does make sure, like, she's the one that puts us in our get along t-shirts
Yeah.
and like
Yeah,
puts us in
because we
timeout.
never fight ever.
Oh god, yeah, there's not any drama at all. Like, never
Yeah,
in
so
a million years.
I just make all these cute T-shirts that I never use. I was the one who recommended to watch Akira, but as a warning, the first time I watched Akira, I had no idea what I was watching, and I hated it coming out. I was just like, well, that
the first one and the only
like
one.
I literally walked out thinking like, well, that was a waste of 2 hours. And it was actually through my second watch where I was just all like, this is like the best thing ever, and Kaneda is my husband.
Oh my god.
So the time this watch through for the podcast, this was my fifth time watching Akira.
Jeez.
God, I can't imagine investing 10 hours into watching this.
It gets better every time, I swear.
And that's coming from someone who's invested a day and a half into watching Avengers Endgame, so
Yeah, it's
I mean, to be fair, you watched that movie once and you're like halfway there, but
yeah. So
that movie was long.
This is a pretty long movie.
Oh, Levi's here.
What? Oh yeah. Levi, we noticed you. Ha.
I noticed.
But yeah, no, I think it took me quite a while to figure out like where this movie was going. So I'm curious for all the people here, at what point were you like, okay, I think I understand where the direction this movie is headed now? At what point did that happen for you?
I don't think it happened for Bo. Did it happen for Bo?
Can you repeat the question? Because like I'm like sitting here looking at the summary, still just trying to like think of things to say because that's what I was told to do. So
You're on a podcast. The point is to talk.
Yeah. So
the question was, at what point, if any, were in the film were you like, okay, I feel like I understand where this is going now.
Never.
Like I feel like I feel like I get
not
the
at
story that
any
this movie is trying
point
to
whatsoever. I'm still just like it's like it's what's it called when you like put like meat in juice and let it sit?
Fermented?
No.
I don't like this.
I can't remember. Like,
oh, I do know what you're talking about.
pickling.
Sure, it's still pickling. That's not the word I was looking for, but we'll use it anyways. Marinating.
Marinating. Okay.
It's still marinating. Bo, it's marinate. Yeah, no, it's.
Levi's trying so hard.
It's still marinating. There are things that are kind of slowly making sense, so I'm hoping to just.
Maybe Bo will understand it by the end of this podcast.
Maybe. Levi, please.
Yeah,
But yeah, Forrest, what about you? What do you? What
I
was
would say, let's see. The question was, when did it start making sense? Is that the
yeah? When or what? I mean, in general, or at what point? Not necessarily makes sense, but at what point were you like, I think I get where this movie, like the direction this movie is going now?
I mean, that's kind of it's an interesting because like at the beginning of the movie, I kind of got the kind of world building they were doing. I wasn't sure where the plot necessarily was going until the old blue child showed up, and then it was like, oh, that's new. What?
That was where it lost me.
And that was like the start of the movie. Is the point, but that all started to a little bit before when we oh god, what's his name? Tetsuo, right?
Mhm.
Sort of antagonist, I suppose we could say. he when he was in the hospital, like he was breaking out of the hospital after the weird trippy LSD with
Mhm.
like the evil teddy bear and the car.
I want to talk more in depth about that scene. It's
Yeah, well,
at some point.
we'll
yeah.
get there, but like that's when it started. I sort of got where the direction of this was going, so that when we got to the part where this movie turns into, you know, go cyberpunk dystopian, you know, movie to a Godzilla movie, if Godzilla was
Or as Brian put it, Dragon Ball
jump,
Z.
Yeah. This is
yeah.
I actually have written in my notes, right? Because like I said, before we were going to do this podcast, I'd never seen Akira. I'd only ever heard of it. When I sat down to watch Akira, I thought I was going to watch some cool, like, testosterone-fueled bike racing anime. Instead, I got an early concept DBZ.
Like, yeah, it does make a transition. It tricks you into thinking it's going to be a dystopian punk thing, and I'm going to go Godzilla movie. It's basically a Godzilla movie.
I mean,
so I actually wrote a 10-page paper on this movie where I likened it to Godzilla.
There you go.
I would also, so I mean, I would also like to point out that this movie takes place 31 years after World War III in Neo Tokyo, in the far distant future of the year 2019.
I saw that. Oh, it's today.
And one of the plot points.
That's why we're watching it.
One of the plot points of Akira is that the 2019 Olympics are going to take place in Tokyo within the show of Akira, which is what they predicted was going to happen back in the far long ago of the year
1988.
1988.
Yeah, I have to say I never get tired of 1980s versions of the future.
Right?
Well, I mean, a perfect example is Tomorrowland in Disneyland was supposed to be I want to say the 90s or the early 2000s of like what they figured the world would be like, and anyone who's been to Tomorrowland knows that the world is not like that at all.
You mean we don't have monorails ever? What?
Nope.
Oh, to answer the question in chat, the original Godzilla movie. I likened it to the original Godzilla movie.
Yeah, for me, I think the moment that I started to understand the direction this movie was going, because like when I first sat down, I was like, okay, we've got like I was really glad to have Annika there, like watching it with me. Otherwise, I would have been so lost in like the first 40 minutes. I mean, and to a certain extent, I still was. Like, I was like, wait, they're on bikes. Why are they fighting each other? And Annika was like, oh, they're in rival bike gangs. And I was like, okay, when was that established? And Annika was like, it wasn't.
It was established when the guys on bikes started speeding down the freeway and hitting each other with pipes. Where were you?
Like,
and to explain that, the Akira manga, which this movie is based off of, goes far more in depth in all of this. And the Akira manga is actually much slower paced than the movie is. So the movie was trying to fix 6 books, 6 like graphic novels into 2 hours. So they had to rush things along.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I definitely felt that, where it was just like it was moving so fast. But the problem was that for the first 40 minutes, it was moving so fast that I didn't know what was happening. Like it took me those 40 minutes to catch up. But for me, the moment where I was like I understood all the world building, right? I was like, okay, it's a dystopian future. Like, I really like the whole concept of Neo Tokyo, where like everybody's rioting, like everything is in disarray, like this whole world's fucked. Like, I also loved the art of Neo Tokyo and everything, and just kind of how they set the stage. I think they actually did a really good job with the world building. But
Yeah,
the
I
problem
was-
was that they spent all of their energy on the world building and didn't spend enough time developing the plot. And I didn't really understand the plot until the moment where Kaneda is like, he helps Kay murder a dude, and then she gets, and then what the fuck is the older dude that Kay is with, Ryu? Yeah, like he comes and finds her, and then they lock Kaneda in a closet. And then nearby they just start having this conversation, and Kaneda like goes
creeps
in,
through the vents,
and listens,
them.
and then they catch him, and then they're like, "Oh man, he hurt us. We should kill him." And he's like, "No, wait. Y'all are talking about my friend. I really need to save him. Like, and so let's work together." And so then they do work together, and that was the moment where I was like, "Okay, I understand the direction this is going now. We've established some characters. We've got this terrorist organization, and we've got Kaneda and his bike gang, and they have to join forces to go save their friend and dismantle the government, supposedly."
Something along
Something
those lines,
to that effect.
Something
right?
about blue old children people.
Yes. And also there are kids that randomly disappear in the middle of crime scenes.
That too, yeah,
God.
and have telekinetic powers
Yep.
and talk through people, and they have some pretty weird superpowers. That
So actually, on that note, what is there any exchange that stands out to you guys? Like, do you guys have like a favorite exchange or a favorite line from the movie, or a scene that you particularly liked?
Please don't call on me. Please don't call on me.
But I was just all like, wait, people talked in that movie?
It really felt like a really long like AMV. Like, I don't.
Oh, I like what Hippie Man's saying. His favorite is Kaneda! Tetsuo!
Yeah, I'll say that's my favorite because it makes me think of the Satsuki Kiryuin.
Forrest, do you have a
I was thinking about, I feel like a lot of the dialogue in this movie is very like it serves the purpose, but it's not really like there is one exception I can think of, but a lot of it was just like, oh, they are talking about the things that are going on and explaining what they are doing, and okay, it was very I won't say formulaic, but it fit the narrative and didn't really add like the. It was very clear to me that the dialogue wasn't really a focus for much of the movie, and it was more like the stuff going on that was that was the focus. But there was a conversation when Kaneda and Kay are sort of in prison together, I guess, after they storm the science building and they get captured, and Tetsuo has this little temper tantrum and flies off like Superman, because apparently that's a thing now. Oh, by the way,
flies off like every DBZ character ever.
Oh my god! But they keep inventing new superpowers for these kids.
He even gets like a fucking like torn cape at the end with like
His hair goes up like Super Saiyan.
Yeah, that's probably where they got they watched this movie and they're like, hey, we could make an entire show about that. But no, my favorite line of dialogue is actually that exchange where Kay gets very philosophical, and it's clear that Kaneda is not following any of this. He's just like he's like, well, he's like, so you want to go for a date after this? After we let you out of jail? Like his brain is very clearly on one thing and hers is on something else. But she gets philosophical and like deep into. Where this power comes from. Where does Akira, what are the origins of this weird power that they're seeing, and is talking about like the chain of evolution, like, oh, we came from apes, and before that, reptiles and fish and amoeba, and maybe there was something before that even, and the kind of just like genes? Yes, good. You got your biology there. All right, you got some genes. But like, so that was kind of cool just to hear.
I
Like,
mean, but to be fair, like, can you blame Kaneda? Like, there was like, as I was rewatching the movie today to take notes, like, there's this whole thing where like they all show up to school, right? And the teacher calls like open study and just doesn't show up. And then like one of Kaneda's buddies is like, "Huh? But what about my burning desire to study? Huh? What? He's just leaving us high and dry." Like,
I love that school.
that is the worst school
and then like
of all time.
and then somebody else in the background is like, "Oh, I want to get laid." Like,
like their school, it seems like the class they were gonna have or something, there's just an engine sitting in the middle of the class. Like, that's all they were just gonna, like, oh, here's an engine, let's take it apart or put together or something. Like, okay, no wonder these kids are all into bikes and stuff. That's
yeah. Like, but like, can you really blame? My point is, can you really blame Kaneda for being lost? Like, his school is a piece of shit.
there's like people passed out from drug abuse like on the side of the school grounds, and like, you know, people are just riding their motorcycles around. The disciplinary guy is just punching people. You know? It's like a school run by mobsters. I don't know what's going on.
But you kind of hit on my favorite thing about this film. My favorite thing is just about everything that comes out of Kaneda's mouth.
Right?
like because Kaneda, like, I feel like he's the perfect mirror for the audience, you know? Like Kay will do some kind of like philosophical like exposition about the world that's like really complicated, and I'll be like, and in my head I'm like, huh? What is she talking about? And Kaneda's immediately like, huh?
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
He's a good foil for he's a good stand-in for the audience. I think you're right about that. And that's, I feel like when you were talking about how like the first 40 minutes don't make any sense, right? Where is this movie going? What's the plot of this? Like, yes, there's world building. Okay, we get it. It's dystopian. There's riots. There's, you know, and like, what's the point? Where's the plot going? Maybe that's intentional. Like, we kind of see a lot of the first part of it through the eyes of, we see the whole movie basically through the eyes of Kaneda, and he, you know, he's just a biker guy. He just rides his motorcycle and maybe goes to that terrible school and like hangs out with his friends. Like, he doesn't know what the revolutionaries are all about or why the government is chasing after these blue old children people, and he's just as confused as we are about all of this. And so I think the plot starts making sense exactly when Kaneda starts understanding what's going on.
Oh,
like
that's
when
a
he
really
figures
good point.
out, oh, you guys are going to go raid the hospital to go get your, you know, to go get the blue kids. Also, my friend is there. I'm going to help you. That's when his involvement in the plot, you know, is when the audience starts being engaged. Maybe I don't know. That's my theory.
Oh, that's good.
No,
I
that's
like
a
that.
really good observation, actually. God, the more we talk about this movie, the more like like anyways, Annika, what's your favorite?
So this is gonna sound kind of silly, considering all of the amazing things that came out of Kaneda's mouth, like, hey, fight with your bare hands, which I love, considering he knows, Kaneda knows that his friend has been endowed with the powers of God, and the first thing he thinks is like, I'm gonna fight that.
Yeah, like my favorite thing too about that is that there's literally that whole scene where Tetsuo like breaks out of his room. Like, the door is broken down. Like, it's like a metal door, and he fucking punched through it. And the doctor and the guards approach him like fucking nothing. They're like, hey, you can't be out of your cell. And he just fucking bitch slaps them, and they go splattering all across the hall.
Smears them across the wall, yeah.
But, like, as much as I love those lines, actually, one of my favorite lines of Kaneda's is, we see all this violence that that he has been growing up in, and, like, you know, because Kaneda is a product of the times. You know, Neo Tokyo is this terrible, trashy place, and so Kaneda has grown up in it and has thus become trashy and a horrible person who gets into bike gangs and blah blah blah. So my favorite line from Kaneda actually is halfway through the scene when Tetsuo is beating up that biker gang for trying to rape his girlfriend. And Kaneda screams at him, "What are you trying to do? Kill him?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am. What's wrong with that?" And then Kaneda stops him. And I remember that was my favorite moment where I was just like, damn, despite him growing up in this time, that kid has some crazy restraint.
Yeah.
And that was like the moment when I really started to identify with Kaneda, because I realized that he was above his, you know, the society, the pressures of society.
I mean, I suppose that's true, but to be fair, later on, Kay shoots a dude in the face, and she's super freaked out about it. And then Kaneda's like, "Is that your first time you killed somebody? I mean, like, I get it, it sucks, but like, you're young. It won't affect your record that much. Just turn yourself in. Everything will be fine. It's like he's dead already. Just like get over it."
So in the manga, Kaneda was actually the one who shot that guy, and he did not hesitate.
Oh, really?
Which is funny because that scene happened immediately after the scene where he was like, "Don't you dare kill him." So
yeah, in this case,
in the manga, it was basically showing that Kaneda knows when to hold restraint and when he has to protect himself. Basically, is how I took that in the manga.
Nice. Well, having not read the manga but having seen the movie, that scene to me was like, okay, first of all, he's definitely buried some people in the backyard, like right, to start with. But maybe in a justified sort of way. But they're those clown gang guys. They're no good, right? But to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense that Kay was upset with this and that this was her first time ever killing something. Like, she literally comes running out of a building that her terrorist organization just blew up. They blew up a mall, basically.
Oh, that was later. The first time when she killed someone, she was very clearly upset about it, and Kaneda does try to.
No.
That was right.
No,
really?
Yeah,
right after.
They blow up the mall, and that's why she's killing somebody, is because the guards were chasing her.
That's right. You're right.
Yeah.
So, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that that's the first, time that this is like, you're part of a terrorist organization that blows stuff up. What did you think was?
It's probably what they were trying to go for, is that this is the first time she's seen the effects of her work.
Perhaps.
Seeing someone die, and
yeah. A terrorist organization, they're a revolutionary force, but they don't know the full cost of what that will mean to tear down the society. It's one thing to say, tear down society and build it anew. It's another thing to realize that means killing a lot of people. And to be fair, not necessarily because of their actions, but the end of this movie kind of ends with like a good 100 million people dying.
I don't know about 100 million, but like it was a lot.
Did you see the size of the build? Like, the skyscrapers in this movie make our skyscrapers look like, 2-story apartments. Like, these are some massive. It was one of the things. One of the notes I wanted to talk about on the world building of this movie and like the architecture style. It's very much this like, I don't know specific architectural terms, but like it's a very modern. The little I know about it is there's an architect called Le Corbusier. Forgive me, I can't pronounce French, but he had this idea of putting all of the stuff in one building, right? So your work, your apartment, your supermarket, your park, everything is all inside this building, right? It's maybe an interior courtyard or something for the park or something, but everything is built inside, so you never have to go outside, right? And that's very much the architectural style that Neo Tokyo seems to be based on, right? Big parks stretched across the rooftops of buildings and massive structures that probably have interior spaces and stuff. Like, it's this and this very sort of. It's very 80s.
Yeah.
Very 80s, like brutalist architecture, sharp concrete corners on everything and weird colors. It was just kind of a cool architecture style, I think.
Yeah, watching a lot of the looking at a lot of the background art for the film, I couldn't help but be reminded of like Batman Beyond,
Hmm.
you know, which to be fair, like Batman Beyond was like early 2000s, so it's a very different time. Yet there was something about the way, like, just the whole like dark, like, you know, a darker color scheme and the structure of all of the buildings and everything. It just and also a lot of the designs for like the vehicles and stuff that really of uh, of Batman Beyond.
Hmm.
And so I kind of wonder how much of Batman Beyond took inspiration from like Akira's version of the future.
I mean, I definitely see this being like I get very, like Cowboy Bebop. I don't know when that came out, but probably a little bit after this, I would imagine. I get kind of
I think
like
Cowboy
the sort
Bebop
of
was
gritty,
90s?
the sort of gritty, city life kind of vibe.
98.
Yeah.
Ah, there you go. But yeah, it's interesting. I like all of the military hardware they've got, like the rifles that everybody has. I think I was like, and I think I've seen that rifle before or something. It's basically like a British. I had to look it up. It's an L-85 apparently, but like they're using like real world, like the military helicopters they're flying around in are all Chinooks basically, the two rotor helicopters that the U.S. military uses. So it's interesting to me that a lot of the military hardware in this movie was very NATO inspired, like a lot of U.S. military tech and stuff, which is like this is Neo Tokyo, right? This is Japan. I don't know. Does Japan have a lot of U.S. planes and tanks? I don't know. I don't know how that works, but
I mean,
They did just get done with World War III.
I suppose.
Do you want to do you want to talk a little bit about the military hardware concepts that they
Sure, yeah.
Know a little bit about that actually.
So the third, my second watch through of Akira, I watched with my fiance, who is a military plane guns like otaku. He like loves everything to do with it, basically. And every time a new weapon showed up, he was bouncing out of his seat, being like, "That's a real thing! That's a real thing!" And like he went into like how it worked, and I don't remember every single like spasm he had, but I remember the last one he had was for the laser guns at the end.
Oh yeah.
And I remember him mentioning that was a real concept that the military was talking about militarizing, but they never actually went through with it. But the 80s was probably, around the height of when they were considering it. So that's probably why Akira implemented it. But yeah, laser weapon technology was definitely something the military was thinking about back then. So it's cool.
I'm pretty sure we have a laser weapon now, but I'm pretty sure it's not personnel.
Yeah.
Like you can't. Yeah. It's mounted to a warship. It's
right.
It's a big thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And then orbital space death lasers. Excuse me. That's a thing.
Strikes, yeah.
Burn it from orbit. It was the thing. To be fair, a lot of 80s movies I feel like had orbital death space lasers. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean there's anything that's cool has orbital space death lasers. I mean, come on.
It's like the plot of every other James Bond movie. What?
Yep. So I kind of love the depiction. I have to admit, like, the more I think about it, the more I really love the depiction of Kaneda.
I can talk all day about Kaneda.
Like, because considering the world that he grew up in, right? Like, I kind of love the characterization of like when they get arrested, right? And they're in the waiting room and they're getting interviewed to see if they're not terrorists. And Kaneda literally looks over in the book and sees a picture of Kay, a book that's like, these people are known terrorists. Look out for them, right? And he's just, she's cute. And then literally goes back into the waiting room, finds her, and is like, I'm going to get her out because I want to. The terrorist that's murdering a bunch of people, I want to get to know her. Like,
you can see his priorities are definitely
and it's like completely like the whole like, yep, terrorist, murdering a bunch of people, blowing shit up. Water under the bridge, but she's cute. Like,
do you want to know how he meets her in the manga?
How?
So they're all hanging out at that bar that, is kind of like their hangout in the manga.
Mhm.
And she thinks it's a dive bar that nobody goes to, so she wants to use that as their location to whisper about their next plans for their terrorist organization. So she and Ryu go in and they sit down, they get a table, and they start talking. And Kaneda just looks over and he's just like, "She's cute. I'm gonna go date her." It's like, but she's clearly with that other guy. I don't care.
Yeah, that seemed to be a trend with him.
And he literally just walked up to their table, sat down, was just like, "So what you doing later tonight?"
Oh my
And then he's just like, "You don't want to listen. Dating older guys is overrated. It's with the younger guys. I swear." It's like right in front of their faces. It's so funny.
Oh my god.
To be
so
fair, he
and then-
does that in the movie too, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so basically Ryu and Kei realize that they can't, meet there anymore. So they're just like, "Let's fucking bounce," and they run away. And then that doesn't sit well with Kaneda and they get into a big fight.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Well, like his tactic for flirting seems to be, so we're like already in a relationship, right? Like just because we're standing next to each other, right? Like I'm just what, you want to go on a date? Let's.
I love that in the movie, right? Like after he kills the dude, right? And she's all upset about it. Like he's going like, "Oh, don't worry, like you're young, off easy. He's already dead. Don't worry about it. Let's go on a date." Like like he's just immediately there, and then Ryu shows up, and then he's like, "Oh, Kei, are you okay?" And then was this guy, and his initial response is like, "Well, it might be a little bit of a stretch to say that we're together, but like."
I haven't slept with her yet. Yeah. Like, holy.
He doesn't.
cow.
He doesn't friend zone people. He relationship zones them. He's like, "We're not friends. We're dating. Excuse you."
I know we've known
And
each
then,
other
like,
for all of
it's
like
like-
5 seconds, but
it's like one of those things where it's just like, no, we're dating now. It's like, excuse me, like when was that decided? Oh, I decided right now. Let's go.
right now.
Like,
God, Kaneda's such a boss. This is why he's the leader of his bike gang, because probably he went up to the leader and was just all like, "I'm the leader now."
No, he probably went up to all his friends and was like, "You know what we should do? Start a bike gang."
That's a great idea.
No, he didn't go out. He's like, "You know what we should do?" He was like, "Guys, we're in a gang now." I'm like, "What? When was that decided?" He's like, "I decided it right now. Let's do it."
That makes me think of that meme where it's like, best way to start a fight. Hey guys, want to start a fight?
That would be his style. Yeah, that's. It's like it's like, "Okay, guys, we're in a gang now." And you're like, "Oh, okay." It was like, "What kind of gang? Like, what are we gonna do in this gang?" And he's like, "Hey, you see that bike over there?"
Yeah.
And steals
Also,
the bike,
to
and then there you
answer Connor. Oh, you already got to. Yeah. To answer Connor Smith in the chat, the movie is available to stream on Funimation. But yeah, no, God, the more we talk about Kaneda, the more I realize I really like his character.
So you remember how I said like the first time I watched the movie I was really confused and I had no idea, and then I just kind of walked out thinking I hated it and it was overrated. So the second time I watched it, I actually had to watch it for college because it was part of my college film course. And so I went to my fiance and I was just like, "Listen, I really hate this movie. It's really confusing. Maybe if I have a second, take, I'll like it more. Can you watch it with me?" And so we watched it together, and I remember we just got to the part where Kaneda just jumps off that bike and just starts running down the street to jump onto another bike to kick him in the face, and my fiance was just like, "This guy's a badass!" And then every
True.
scene with Kaneda was just like, "This kid's a badass!"
Man, oh man.
Someone's clicking real loud.
Is that...
So, but yeah. So, in any case, why don't we? So, I've got another. Got another question for you guys because I really want to talk about this.
Let's talk more about Kaneda. He's my husbando.
So, what did y'all think of the Tetsuo hospital room scene?
Skip.
Who's? Come on, I'm asking you a question. Who's gonna go first?
I'm putting my finger on my nose for nose goes.
So when we got to that scene, when I watched it last night with Brian, or 2 nights, I don't remember when we watched it. We watched it together.
Yeah.
I remember I said, okay, so there's a scene coming up, and I've seen this movie 4 times, and I still don't get it. So if you can give me another, but yeah, I think I get it now.
That was, if there was any part of this where the writers were on LSD, it was that scene.
To be honest, I think what was happening there, what I really do think was happening there, was we learned that the kids, the experiment kids are trying to basically
hang on 1 second. To answer anybody in the chat who has seen the movie but doesn't know the hospital scene we're talking about, this is the scene where Tetsuo wakes up in a cold sweat. He's like, he tries to take a drink, and then fucking like cars and toys and shit just come like attack him and become all big and scary.
He's attacked by a giant bear monster made of toys.
Yep.
And then a car monster made of toys shows up, and
yep.
So what I think was really happening there was because it's established that the kids were basically they were trying to kill him in that scene, right?
I think so.
I don't know if they were trying to kill him. I feel like disguising yourself as a giant scary teddy bear is maybe not the most effective way to kill someone.
Well, if they weren't trying to kill him, they were definitely trying to scare him. And I think the toys, the reason that scene is so weird is because the animators were trying to invoke a feeling of something that we find safe and cute and fun to be absolutely terrifying, kind of like with clowns, you know.
It had a very Five Nights at Freddy's vibe to me.
Yeah, so I think the feeling they were trying to go for there is that these are children, like the experiments, you know, they have a big giant toy room. All they've known most of their lives is playing with toys. This is what's familiar to them. So the bear and the car definitely are supposed to be representative of their childish tendencies, but toys are generally supposed to be fun and safe. So the fact that they weren't is supposed to invoke some weird, like, you know, fear, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. See, I thought when I first saw the scene, I thought I knew what was going on, and then I got more confused. But now you say that, it makes a little more sense, I think, because when we first, Tetsuo escapes twice from the hospital, basically.
Yeah,
right?
this
and
hospital
the first time
sucks.
Yeah, they got.
That's not how it goes in the manga. So
in
the manga, he goes back. He goes back willingly.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, anyways, like the first time when he like goes back to school and then like runs off with his girlfriend, only to run into more biker gangs and some trouble. He's like, he's having visual hallucinations, basically, right? Like he sees the ground crumbling underneath him, but it's not. He sees his guts spilling out, but they're not. You know, he's like he's definitely having visual hallucinations, and I think that's, you know, it's always interesting in anime.
But he's not having visual hallucinations, because if you slow down that scene, every single shot was a clip from later in the movie.
Well, no, because he has like flash forward.
So yeah, he's predicting the future, because that's how badly they're messing with his head.
Right, but after that he starts having, I mean, true. I don't know if it's like scene for scene the same. Maybe he's seeing the kinds of things that are going to happen, but he's clearly seeing things that aren't there or aren't happening yet.
Of course. Yeah.
Anyways, so it's interesting when anime tries to do the visual hallucinations thing, because, you know, it's hard to tell what's supposed to be, oh, that's just cartoonish, you know, exaggeration, and oh no, that's supposed to be like he's seeing things that aren't there.
Well, so I don't think it's that he's hallucinating and it's this byproduct of the drugs. I think that's literally what they're trying to get him to do, because they're trying to make the next Akira, in that Akira is this all-powerful being who can predict the future, just like Kyoko can. And like everything he's seeing, those are things that all are gonna happen later on, like the guts spilling out. That's him turning into that giant blobby poop monster that confused you so much.
Yes, that part. And I get that he's seeing scenes from the future, but he's seeing scenes from the future in the present, and
Right, of course.
obviously
And he doesn't know how to
that's
control it.
not currently happening. So
Yeah, so he's basically
I'm not
he's
saying
awakening.
that like the drugs that he's on are giving him visual hallucinations. The crazy mind stuff, that they're still visual hallucinations, even if they're from the future.
No, agreed.
Is that how that works? I don't know.
So
I don't have visions of the future, so I don't really know the terminology here. But I thought that's what the hospital scene with the car and the rabbit and the creepy toys was. And then later in the playroom, we actually see some of the kids, like he hits them with a force blast thing and blows away the toy monster, and inside is the kid. So it looks like part of that scene is visual hallucination, like where the little toys are marching up his bed, and part of it is actually the kids dressed up as giant toy monsters trying to scare and or kill him.
Well, they aren't dressed up. They all have psychokinetic powers, so they have the ability to manipulate the mind. So all of that was them manipulating his mind.
Well, I don't know that it was.
No, I
though.
think
it seems
no,
like they might
I
have
think it
built
was
a
because
suit
like
of toys.
Well, like because like remember like he falls through a wall made of giant Legos, but but after the kids disappear, like that's gone. Like all this shit strewn about the floor, like that wasn't already in the room, it's gone. So I do think that I actually think that was them screwing with his head, but then his powers becoming such that he was able to block out their screwing with his head.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But yeah, no, I really think oh shit, I had something that I was gonna say, and now I forgot it.
All right, we'll think of Brian's brain.
Yeah.
We'll think on it. Because I guess I can add on to that. Is I rewatching that for the 5th time. I everything in that scene was very, like again, it was terrifying. But remember when the teddy bear starts to like bleed everywhere? It's bleeding white. And later, when Tetsuo falls, he splashes and he realizes, oh, this is milk. And I think that's what the teddy bear was also bleeding milk. And so every single thing from that, even though it was terrifying in its form, it was all very childish. Milk is childish, teddy bears are childish, rabbits are childish. That
toy cars,
Okay, I remembered what I was gonna say.
See, I just buffered for you.
So so Forrest, you were talking about like, it's always interesting when anime tries to do these hallucinogenic scenes because there's a difficulty in determining reality versus fantasy, due to the nature of visual anime.
Which, to be fair, is kind of the point of said scenes, but still.
But I would actually argue that it's actually very easy to tell the difference between a hallucinogenic scene and a regular scene, because generally they will be denoted via sound cues. Something auditorily that tells you what's happening is not reality. The difference is, and at first I didn't like it, but now I think I really do, is that instead what they do is they drop all the sound. And what that sound tells you, losing all the sound tells you that what is happening is not reality, but at the same time, you have to take a minute to figure out that that's what's happening. There is this moment where you're like, wait a minute, is this happening for real? Is this not happening for real? And I really like that because I think that puts the audience kind of in the perspective of Tetsuo as this is happening to him, going like, wait, what the fuck is happening? What am I seeing?
Well, maybe that's a theme for this movie. If we sort of see a lot of the early stuff and some of the later stuff from Kaneda's perspective and learn about the plot as he learns about the plot, now we're seeing this, from Tetsuo's side of things a little bit. That may be a running theme in the film. I'd have to do a deeper analysis of some of the other scenes with like K in them or something.
So
that's interesting. That's probably a good branching off point to talk about the sound and the soundtrack for this, I imagine.
Sure.
I would just say...
I remember you mentioning you weren't a big fan of it at first, Brian.
I mean, it's not necessarily that I'm not a big fan of it. It's actually there's a lot of stuff in it that I really like that I think is really cool. But I also think that it's a product of its time,
That's fair.
right? Like I'm sorry, like those dogs that went running by, like they were real poorly recorded. Like, and I've heard those dogs in like a million different things from like the same time period. You
Was
know,
there a Wilhelm scream in there somewhere? Probably.
I did not hear a Wilhelm scream, unfortunately.
Uh,
But yeah, I mean, like, and there
I-
was a lot of like just kind of like the very like classic old school, you know, like pitch shifted, um, uh, or rather not pitch shifted, but frequency shifted, like, you know, synthy anime kind of sounds that you hear in everything from that time period, from uh you know, dating back to, you know, like Gundam and all of those, like, especially a lot of mech anime. You hear a lot of that kind of stuff. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with it. It just sounded like period anime to me. But
hmm.
I think that you know, Forrest, you were probably aiming to talk about the music. Um
Well, yeah, I was actually. I was in terms of sound design. The
mhm.
part I really liked was when they go to space, and there's absolutely zero sound because that's how space works.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, good on you. That was I liked that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the soundtrack is, I think, what I was, because when you say traditional anime, you don't mean like the soundtrack is traditional 80s
No, I
anime
mean
kind of.
I mean like the sounds that they use, like the
Okay,
actual sound
okay. The
design.
actual sound design. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I can't really speak to, but the soundtrack to me, it's a lot of, and I'm gonna say my bit, and then I'm sure you're gonna talk for a million years on this, Brian, because you're the sound guy. But like, if there's just a lot of industrial noise and drums, and I think part of the soundtrack is just somebody breathing heavily into a microphone.
Yep.
I'm
Actually,
pretty
it
sure
actually
that's
was
what.
probably about 3 or 4 people breathing heavily into a microphone.
Okay, all right. They just all stood around the mic and yes, we'll just make a funky remix out of this. That'll be
No, it
great.
wasn't. Well, actually, maybe they did do that, but they definitely did multiple recordings so they could get it super stereo and make it like real weird and disconcerting. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's all. I was just like, I don't know what's going on with the soundtrack. I think the most regular thing in the soundtrack was the credits song that's just a bunch of like tribal drumming stuff. And I was like, okay, that I can get behind. That to me sounds like music. The rest of this, I don't know what the heck's going on.
I actually really liked the soundtrack for this movie because it was so out there and different from what I'm used to hearing. I've heard a million composers try to copy John Williams. I've heard a million composers try to copy Hans Zimmer, right? And so I'm always really excited when I hear something that I've never heard before. Um, and
I
I
mean, there
think
is a reason why we don't try new things all the time. Like sometimes those things don't work, but
I mean, sometimes they don't work. I don't think that that's the case for Akira, though. I think that adding the tribalistic drum, I think that the tribalistic drums are there probably to represent the different factions. You know, the like the whole nature of a tribe, right? You've got all these different. You've got the religious faction. You've got the government. You've got the anti-government faction. You've got the different factions of the of the the biker gangs.
hmm, it's a very
Um,
tribalistic society they live
yeah,
in.
it's a very tribalistic society, and so I like that a lot. I also love the all of the industrial kinds of sounds and the stuff that they were adding in there to kind of like they. I think a lot of the time they were really blending the line between music and sound design, music and ambience.
Hmm.
Um, and I really like it when movies and TV shows do stuff like that and kind of you can tell that the music team and the sound team are working in tandem to create a soundscape that's going to be really striking and really set the stage for the given scene or movie. Um, and yeah, like the whole like industrial sounds and everything I think really spoke to um the whole industrial nature of not just the society itself but also to the nature of you know, the military kinds of facilities that they had, because I'm sorry, like their cable management down where they were keeping Akira, it was abysmal. But
Oh man, yeah, it definitely had the look of like people just kept adding and adding and adding stuff to, and they just nobody planned anything.
yeah.
So I really like the music of Akira because it does one of two things. One, it implements these like old sounding tribal drums that, you know, which I think I need to do more research on this, but I think they're like Japanese tribal drums. But then they also include like, you know, the most revolutionary like synth from the 80s that's like new and like and basically revolutionary at that time. So it's basically Akira's music. While it's weird and it feels kind of uncomfortable, it's a blend of the future and the past, which I think is complements well to Akira's theme.
Yeah,
I completely concur with that, and I think that I mean, I think you could also interpret that as a blend of new and old ideas, which is which is the very thing, like it's the government versus the anti-government faction, right? Like the government is I mean, they even said it, like the previous prime minister was like initiated some kind of tax reform that was absolutely awful, and the current government is trying to straighten it out. But the citizens want a return to form of what things were like before that tax reform. And so, you know, like, yeah, going back and forth between the new and old, I think you're right. That's also 100% a major theme of Akira that's represented in the music. Also, I just love 80s synth themes. Like, I just it makes me it gets me excited every single time, and I would be lying if I said that half of the reason that I love uh uh, uh oh Jesus, why am I
Kaneda?
No, why am I spacing the name of it?
Kaneda?
No. Um what's the fucking 80s throwback that's on Netflix that everybody loves?
Stranger Things?
Stranger Things. I don't know why I couldn't remember Stranger Things. Half the reason why I love Stranger Things as much as I do is because of the soundtrack.
That's fair.
The soundtrack and the D&D, right? Like this actually, it's interesting you mentioned Stranger Things because the first, not the first half, the middle third, I guess, of the movie reminds me a lot of. I mean, at that point, it's basically the plot of Stranger Things. You know, kid with psychic powers breaks out of mental facility as government tries to restrain them and increase. Like, it's basically.
Do you mean that Stranger Things is basically just Akira?
Yeah, but yeah, it's just like they haven't gotten to the goopy god monster part yet, but maybe that's a sign of where things are going. I don't know. Actually, you know, I take that back. The current season of Stranger Things, goopy blob monsters. There you go.
Yep. So, but yeah, no, I really love the music for this film. I think that it had a lot of really, really cool and inventive stuff. So let's see. I think I'm going through my notes and looking through what we've already talked about.
It's already been an hour.
Yeah, I had one point just before I forget. I don't think I'm going to fit it in elsewhere. When I talk about that old and new, right? The clash in the music and the clash in the design. It's very like the architecture style is very what in the 80s they thought the future was going to look like, right? This very modernist architecture kind of style, but like there's some old we're dealing with like old supernatural powers and kinds of things. So there's definitely that clash. I was going to say some of the earlier riot scenes from the beginning of the movie, you could have ripped those out of the headlines today.
Yeah,
we could be looking at Hong Kong today and see the same kind of thing. Like it's
and that's why I feel like Akira is like so relevant even to today's times, because it's definitely like this clash between like what the government is doing and what the government wants and what the people want. But then, like, I feel like this movie is very clever because they go into what the government is doing with that money, and it's siphoning it into these kids who this colonel thinks is going to save the world because he thinks Akira's going to come back and try to destroy things, and he has to basically put his money into basically saving the world, or not the world, but at least the town. It's so in his, you know, obviously in everybody's perspective, but in his perspective, he's the hero. But he's the one who's basically making, you know, this money go down the garbage in some people's eyes. So you have to kind of figure as you watch this movie, you know, is he doing the right thing? You know, should the people, you know, kind of relax? Is it the government's fault? It's not so black and white. And
well, it's definitely not. There's a lot of like factions even within the government. It's not just like government, you know, government bad, rebels good, or government kind of bad, rebels don't really know what they're doing. You know, there's that scene with all the politicians who are all just like yelling at each other.
I love the dude who gets called like I think he
an
gets
old man.
Like he gets called an old man, like he gets called Oji-san, and then like just in that old man voice, like Nandato.
What'd you say?
You calling me?
What you call me?
God, no, I love the politics screaming. It's so funny and it's so accurate, I feel.
Yeah,
it reminds me of scenes of like the British Parliament.
Like I love how it really depicts the politicians as really not understanding anything. It's like you know, oh, but like that happened with 25, with number 25, and they're like, wait, I thought 25 was Akira. No, that's 21.
No,
what number are we on again?
Yeah.
How many kids have we turned into psychic monsters? I don't remember. Yeah. And they all have their different. So there's like the politicians with all their different like things, and then the colonel is just like he's the military guy. I mean, at some point he literally just takes over the government. You know, they send somebody to relieve him of his duty. And shoot him.
Shoot him.
Yeah, shoot. Don't kill him. Just shoot him. I'm done with this. I'm taking over. Like, I'm pulling rank. But so there's like I didn't really understand. Like the revolutionary leader, like this kind of rat man. He's got buck teeth like a rat. He's supposed
his name is Nezu, which is the first words for Nezumi, which means rat in Japanese.
They couldn't have put it more on the nose.
His name is Mr. Rat, basically.
He's Mr. Rat Man. You know, the revolution is happening, and you know, and they're losing. The government is literally like attacking, and he's just shoveling fistfuls of cash into his, and then there's some dead guys in a bathtub. I didn't get what was going on with that. Did he kill them? Who knows? But then he shoots his own guy, but can't finish the job because he's a terrible shot or something, and then just decides to run and then eat some pills and dies. He was having a heart attack, which is why he missed. No sense.
So that's much more explained in the manga. So, hey, moral of this podcast: go read the manga.
The more this podcast goes on, I'm just okay. So the movie is confusing, but that's because
it's moving so fast.
That, like, I understand why watching it 5 times and also maybe reading the manga probably helps.
So in the manga, the kids basically. Do you remember when Takashi, the little old child, runs away, and then Masaru, the little floaty child, is just like, "Come on, we can't survive outside. You have to come back with me." Do you remember that scene? In the manga, it's revealed that the reason they can't live outside is because they have to ingest these drugs constantly.
Well, the movie hits on that too.
A little bit, yeah. But the drugs are a very big centerpiece in the manga because Kaneda gets his hands on them and he tries to start replicating them, and that's why he turns into the Capsule Gang, because they're trying to.
Is that why there's a pill on his?
Yes,
that's never explained.
It's a very big plot point in the manga. So yeah,
is he just like advertising some pills or something?
Yeah, so his gang is basically in a turf war with the clown gang, and they're all fighting over this capsule drug that they've invented. And so when they find out the kids also ingest capsule drugs that are like, I think 1,000,000 times stronger than the ones they deal with, Kanada's just like, business opportunity.
Wow.
So it's a much bigger thing. So yeah, go read the manga, everybody.
And
So I mean, we've already been going for about an hour, so it's about time to, I think, start wrapping up our discussion here. But there's one big question that I think I wanted to ask you guys about your takeaways from this film, and that is, what do you think this movie was about?
Oh
Like,
boy.
What do you think the moral of this film was? Why do you think that this was a story that was told?
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs.
Or else you'll get attacked by a teddy bear in a hospital.
Stay in school unless your school is shitty. Don't do drugs. Stay away from kids that disappear.
And obviously date all the terrorists.
Teleporting kids. Date all the terrorists.
Please do not date the terrorists.
Bad idea. Very bad idea.
No, but for real, what do you guys think the actual moral of this story was? What do you think this movie was trying to say? Because admittedly, like, I'm not 100% sure myself.
Yeah.
You know, my roommate had something really profound to say about it earlier, because I told her that we were covering this, and she was like, oh yeah, I love that movie. It's a really great example of, and then she said something, and I was like, wow, I definitely didn't get that vibe, and I'm sorry that I can't remember it.
Go ask her.
She's in bed.
Damn it.
But yeah, she had something really good to say about it because she likes it, but that's her.
The question that I asked was for Hippie Man in the chat. It was, what do you think the moral of this story was? Why do you think this was a story that was told? And what do you think this movie was trying to say? Because admittedly, I'm not 100% certain myself.
So the movie opens up with an explosion.
Yes.
And it's a very telltale explosion that causes mass destruction. So right off the bat, I remember the first time I watched Akira, I'm like, okay, so we're talking about World War II.
We're talking about nukes, yeah.
We're talking about the bombs, okay?
There's clearly a euphemism.
Yeah, like, and then it's just the first thing on the screen, World War III.
And you're like, wait a minute, I think that one.
Also, yeah, that's exactly my thought process. I was like, oh, okay, so that wasn't the atomic bomb. So throughout the movie, I was looking, I guess, for atomic destruction themes through that, and that, yeah, I think that is my takeaway. I actually wrote a 10-page essay on this where I likened Akira to Godzilla, and I basically said both movies are about the monsters that people make in, through society. And, in Godzilla, it was obviously Godzilla, and in Akira, I think it was Tetsuo, because Tetsuo is the monster of his generation, basically. He takes, society created Tetsuo, and Tetsuo found the power to do something with all of this hatred that society gave him, basically.
Right. It's very much a story about how the guy who has gotten beaten up all his life, and in life is just given a terrible hand of cards to, all of a sudden he's holding all the aces.
Exactly.
Right?
And so he's the monster that I guess we created. But both movies deal with the monsters in different ways. So I think both movies being Akira and Godzilla. And in Godzilla, this man basically invents something he doesn't want to be used for bad, so he takes it, kills Godzilla, and kills himself with Godzilla. And he takes responsibility for Godzilla, despite the fact that it wasn't his fault that Godzilla was created. Same thing in Akira. Kaneda takes responsibility for Tetsuo, despite the fact that he's not the one who gave Tetsuo these powers or these anger. All of his life, Kaneda has been trying to protect Tetsuo. He's been trying to help Tetsuo, but it's clearly fell on deaf ears. But because of that, Kaneda feels responsible, so he takes responsibility for the monster he didn't create. So that's kind of my takeaway from it. I think it's basically about taking responsibility for things that may not necessarily be your fault, but you have a power to make a difference over, and you should if you can. That's my takeaway.
That's
launching off of that. I think I want to take that one step further, because
Go for it.
I think that you're on the right track. I think my takeaway is that I think that this movie is a warning about the things that we create in the name of the greater good. And I think that it's also saying that, you know, whatever we create, we have to take responsibility for it, even if we're not the scientist that created it. We as humanity created this. And that's why Kaneda is taking responsibility for Tetsuo, because he's like, Tetsuo, you know, I wasn't the one who did this to Tetsuo. You know, the government did this to Tetsuo, but Tetsuo is my friend. And so I'm gonna do something about this. So I actually think that this movie is a warning of about technology and taking responsibility for it. That would be my takeaway, I think.
and that it's society, and Kaneda is sort of a stand-in for society. He's sort of the everyman, right?
Right.
That represents people. He's the one who takes responsibility. Yeah, because I don't like how this movie portrays the scientist character. I have to say, he's very much a like he's too deep into the weeds, right? Like
he's
he
your
realized
typical mad scientist.
He's your typical mad scientist, which it's unfortunate that I mean, this is the 80s, and yeah, okay, but portrayals of scientists in media are either mad scientist or there's really no other portrayal of science in movies. It's you're a mad scientist if you're going to be an interesting character. But you know, the very first thing he's told by the colonel is, hey, if this gets out of hand, shut it down. And you immediately can tell, like, his response is just like, oh yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, you're not going to do that, are you? Because he's too invested. And that's, you know, this is his baby. He's been experimenting on these children and this weird visualization thing that doesn't make any sense. What does the visualization represent? I don't know, whatever. But it's cool and shiny, and hey, 80s graphics. So
I think that was just basically supposed to show that one of those graphs was Akira, and Tetsuo's was very close to it. I think that's the only thing that shiny thing was supposed to represent.
Well, whatever it was showing, you know, even in the end, right? Like, the people actively trying to prevent disaster here, the colonel with all of his, you know, conventional ordnance and orbital space death lasers and whatnot, and Kaneda with the single laser rifle that he puts to much better use than any of the soldiers who had them. Very much. The scientist, meanwhile, very much on the sidelines of this, just watching all of this happen, and still, like, trying to, even at the point where, you know, earlier in the movie when Tetsuo has basically broken free of containment and he's about to start rampaging the city, all the scientist can do is, oh, this is so amazing, like, imagine this could reinvent physics, no, all of science. Like, dude, he's gonna blow up the city before any of that happens. What do you think's gonna happen? Like, he's definitely that portrayal of the very out-touch, very head in the clouds scientist who's just not in touch with the real applications of what he's created. And that's probably a message for the movie. Like, that's kind of, you know, the revolutionaries very out of touch with the actions, you know, with how their actions affect people. The government is very out of touch with how their actions affect people, right? Like, it's definitely a running theme. I just don't like that the only scientist character we see is portrayed that way. Sorry, that was my bit on the scientist guy.
I want to say I definitely haven't said anything for like 10 minutes, hippie, so...
That's been me!
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I will 100% agree with that. I also think there was a whole thing at the end that I didn't really get where
Akira just creates a universe and is just like, later, y'all, yeet.
well, yeet.
Basically, yeah.
No, beyond that, like there is this like after Tetsuo and Akira are gone, right? They do this whole thing where like we get to see like it looks to be like a giant eye, and it just says I am Tetsuo, and it seems like, you know, like Tetsuo has kind of become I understood that as like Tetsuo becoming Akira or Akira becoming Tetsuo, like them becoming one, and now they're like an all
A
powerful
Lovecraftian monster
being. Like they basically became a god. That was kind of how I interpreted that, but I don't know in the context of the movie's moral or its message what that means.
I think it means that there's a future. I think that means that Tetsuo is now part of a different universe. He's now in a parallel dimension with Akira, but he's not dead. And I think that was intentional because, like, he creates the singularity that creates this alternate universe. It's just like, oh, okay, he's gone, he's dead. Okay, that's the end of Tetsuo's story. And I think that part right there was saying, like, no, Tetsuo's not gone. He's still out there somewhere. This isn't his ending. Which I would like to use to segue into my next point that Akira is getting a sequel.
What?
That I didn't know. They announced it at AX this year, but Katsuhiro Otomo is now in the works of making a new anime with Sunrise, who are the guys who make Gundam, and he is making a new anime called Orbital Era, which is slated to be a sequel to Akira.
Like an actual sequel or a spiritual sequel?
I think actual, but it could be spiritual. We're not sure.
It seems this movie kind of ends, right? Because you're absolutely right. He, like, Akira, you know, breaks himself out of the jar parts are being kept in and reassembles himself. I guess that's a power he has. And then, you're right, basically creates another universe, takes him and Tetsuo into that, and then bye. And then there's this weird part where we see Kaneda sort of looking in, because when he's like, there's this light that expands outward, right? And all the kids are like, "Oh, don't go into it. You can't get out if you go in." And the one kid's like, "Screw it, I'm going in." And then the other kids follow him, right? I'm like, well, maybe together we can help, you know, constrain Tetsuo or something like that.
No. You're mistaken. The kids didn't go in to stop Tetsuo. Tetsuo was being taken care of. He was done.
Okay.
Akira totally was kicking his ass.
No, they went in to help
Kaneda. They saw Kaneda get caught up, and Takashi was basically saying, like, we got to help him. And they're like, no, you can't help him. He's done. He's being caught up in the singularity. He's going to go off into the other universe with Akira. And they said, yeah, but he doesn't deserve that. None of this was his fault. And so he jumps in, and the kids are just like, well, you know, now Takeshi's going to die. We have to help him. Otherwise, his sacrifice will be in vain. So we'll all sacrifice ourselves to basically help Kaneda out of this thing. They basically pull Kaneda out of a black hole is what's happening.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Sure.
And now there's a universe of magical kids.
Yeah, exactly. Of old kids.
I want the magical girl spin-off of Akira.
Maybe that's what the sequel will be about.
There you go. Yeah.
So, and I think that also leads more into that theme we were talking about, where it's like taking responsibility for stuff that may not necessarily be your fault. Because the kids all combine their powers to help Kaneda, and then they get caught up and they're not allowed into our existence anymore.
I'm sorry, Dorian Barnes says, Tetsuo, I'm a head out. 100%. That's exactly what happened.
Just pieces out into another universe or something.
No. Honestly, the more we've talked about this movie, the more I've realized that I actually kind of like it.
Isn't it great?
It's weird, it's out there, and it's confusing. But yeah, I actually, now having the time to really talk it out and go back and forth, like, I actually think that this is a pretty cool movie. How do you guys feel after this whole discussion?
I feel like I might have not been watching the same movie as you guys.
Did yours have bikes and goop monsters in it? 'Cause-
You know, it did, but like.
Again, Akira is definitely one of those things you gotta watch twice. So, all of you guys who we've inspired to watch this movie, if you're confused, don't worry. Watch it again or read the manga.
You are not alone, my friends.
But definitely go out to watch this a couple times or go out and read the manga because I'm super stoked for the sequel.
Bring a friend.
Bring a friend who knows what they're talking about.
Or just to experience it with you, because
You can both
otherwise
be confused.
you're probably going to be sitting there for a while going, huh? You're going to be doing your best Kaneda impression. Like, huh?
Yeah, so
Nani?
if you're confused, just know that Kaneda is confused with you, and just latch on to Kaneda. He knows what's happening.
He figures it out.
Well, except
kind
that
of.
he doesn't, but that's the point. That's why
He has no idea what's going on.
That's why you'll be able to empathize with him.
Doing stuff anyways, you know.
To answer a question from a little earlier, yeah, I do think that we're gonna plan on having Annika here for some more podcasts.
Oh, really? I guess. I mean, this podcast's okay. I guess.
Wow.
I'm so happy that the okay, I guess, like meme is just like everywhere in KRWBY now because it was just such a casual thing that I said and now everyone just uses it. It makes me so happy.
But yeah, no, we'll be announcing our next film shortly. Also, we're super stoked for Ruby coming back. I'm sure we're gonna have Annika on for episodes of that. We're gonna have a bunch of people on when Ruby comes back. Lots of KRWBY guests from a lot of our voice actors and cast and crew, and it's gonna be a good time. But yeah, so we'll be announcing our next movie in a little bit to give you some time to, if you guys want to continue to follow along with us as we watch, we'll be sure to give you plenty of warning if it's a movie that you haven't seen, you want to go see it before the podcast.
Should probably mention the schedule, like the release schedule.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I put it in the post.
Well, not everyone's in the server though.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So, you're right. Not everyone's in the server. We probably at the top of the podcast should have explained why we're not talking about Fire Force.
Probably. I think that's evident enough, but
yeah.
Yeah, no, I just came to these guys and I was like, hey, do you want to talk about my husbando, Kaneda?
Yeah, so the reason that, for just a quick TLDR, the reason why we're not talking about Fire Force this week is because we made a unanimous decision last week to drop Fire Force. We just weren't enjoying it anymore. It was there was a lot of stuff that we were just finding really frustrating about the show, and we found ourselves being very negative every week about it, which is fine. We heavily believe in constructive criticism and all that stuff, but we don't like to be overly negative, and we certainly don't want to come onto the podcast and have it be a chore to talk about whatever we're talking about.
And it's not usually, it's not as interesting to just hear a bunch of people whine about something they had to watch for their podcast and really didn't enjoy, and just spend an hour whining about it. You know, that's not really enjoyable. And that's kind of
and
what
this is why I've kept quiet.
So we definitely we decided that to drop it, but we've got a new season of anime starting up very soon, but RWBY kind of starts in the middle of that, so it didn't make sense to start a new season of anime and then just drop that to go to RWBY. So we decided that until RWBY comes back, we're going to be talking about a new anime film. But it's going to, the schedule until RWBY comes back is going to be bi-weekly. So we're not going to be back next week, but we're going to be back the week after.
With the Tanya the Evil movie, I believe.
Oh, it's one of the things that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a number of movies lined up to potentially watch.
I have a lot of suggestions if you want husbandos.
I know.
I actually thought of one that I want to suggest after we're off here because I think that it might be. I know that we've already kind of talked about what we want, but for the last one, we were still kind of up in the air of what we wanted to do for the one right before the review episode.
That's true. So basically, the schedule moving forward is like today was Akira. On October 6th, we're going to be back at 11 p.m. Eastern Time with another film. And then on October 20th, we're going to be back at the same time with another film after that. And then on the 27th, that's a week before RWBY Volume 7 returns, we're going to do a RWBY Volume 7 pre-show where we're going to talk about the previous volumes. We're going to talk about what we're looking forward to this volume, what we want to see, predictions, all that good stuff. And then on November 3rd at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, RWBY Talk officially returns, and we are going to be back on a weekly schedule talking about the new episodes of RWBY Volume 7 as they come out. So that is that's the schedule. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. It was a lot of fun. I actually think this went pretty well. I liked we experimented with the format a little bit, as rather than we used to just go chronologically through the episode, but I kind of like this more like asking questions discussion format.
Mm-hmm.
I think that went really well. Be sure to let us know if you thought that it worked well, or any suggestions that you guys might have to make things better, because we definitely, while we're doing these anime films, we want to kind of use this as a vessel to experiment with our format and try to make the podcast a little more entertaining to listen to, rather than just feeling like you're getting a recap
summary
of what happened
the
in
episode.
the episode. So anyways, yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun. We will see you all again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.